Right. Well, of course, it's North Korea is just a sideshow, as is everything else. The prices are dramatically undervalued because of manipulation that's been going on for many, many years. And now that as I call it, the most destructive, the largest, most destructive fiat Ponzi scheme of all time is in its terminal malignant stage. We're seeing more manipulation of markets than we've ever seen before, to the point where it's become a 24/7 phenomenon. And as I call, we have dot-com valuations in the Great Depression era in financial assets, and in precious metals, the lowest ever inflation-adjusted prices. Not to mention the fact that because the mining industry has been so decimated by this manipulation, we now have falling supply for years to come at a time where inventories above ground available for sale are as low as they've ever been. And of course, the money printing is getting ready to rocket higher. So precious metals from an investment standpoint never been better. But as you know, on a daily basis, they always will find a reason to knock prices down. This week is no different than the July 4th week. It's a sleepy summer week, and they just came in, guns a-blazing starting Sunday night as usual. And they say it's because North Korean tensions have eased, or they put out some stupid number like the Empire State Manufacturing Index, and they say, look, the economy's good. And it's like, well, didn't everyone remember that just last week we had all this horrible economic data and deflation numbers, and the Fed giving its ding-dong, the Fed is dead speech, and now we have expectations starting to creep in of a December rate cut. But all of a sudden, there's a lull. Trump goes to play golf, and because it's August, and he doesn't tweet as much, and the next thing you know, the PPT and the cartel have the upper hand. And as for gold, you think it's a surprise that it's always 1,300. It gets stuck at. It got to 1,297. What was it? A month ago, before Janet Yellen comes out and says, "Oh, we may be getting a little more hawkish here. We may be raising rates more than expected." And then on the July 4th week, when everyone's on vacation, they smash prices. They cover their shorts on the COMEX, and a week later, she gives a speech on Capitol Hill and says, "Oh, I was just kidding. We're basically as high as rates are ever going to go." And everyone follows suit, all the other central banks. And just as the COMEX shorts almost get to positive net long, then all of a sudden they start again. And it's summertime, so it's a lot easier to do these things. So, look, North Korea is a present and clear and present danger among many other economic and geopolitical things. And I'm sure we haven't seen the last of it. And certainly when August concludes very shortly and people come back from vacation, there's going to be a lot of things going on. And yes, 1,300 is a big deal. The mid 1300s is where we got after the Brexit before they capped it. It's where we got on election night after they capped it, and it's where it's gotten now twice in the last 2 months before they capped. And the reason being, because again, gold and silver have both exceeded their 5.5-year downtrend lines going back to the 2011 attacks. For gold, it's like 1230, and silver, it's like in the 15s. But gold's 200-week moving average, 200-week moving average is around 1250 or 60, I'm not sure. And in silver, it's in the 17s. So they're kind of fighting these battles to just finish off breaking off these great long-term technical levels. And in the meantime, the cartel's fighting against many, many forces. So yes, we definitely have to break above 1,300. That's a very, very major level psychologically, and we will. It's just a matter of time.
Andy, one of the things you point out is gold is never allowed to move up more than 1%, and the Dow Jones isn't able to fall below 1%. Now, I guess the devil's advocate argument is that it's a psychological thing, and traders use that number as some sort of a barometer for when to buy, when to sell, and to kind of come in and trade it. But we have the dollar index, which appears to be on the verge of falling through this level, 93, 92. We've had some strength as of today with easing up on tensions with North Korea. But what are your thoughts on some of these concepts here?
Right. Well, again, it's funny because when I started in precious metals, it's been 15 years now. Bill Murphy called it the $6 rule, because back then the price was $300 or $400, and $6 equated to 2%. And so for many years, it was always the $6 rule, no matter what the price is. And eventually, when the price rose high enough, that, the dollar value rose, but the percentage value stayed the same. And yes, the rule is technically 2%, because it's like you might get one day a year where the price goes up more than 2%, but on 99% of all the other days, it won't go up more than 1%. I mean, you look at last week, we had the North Korea tensions, right? There was one day it got up $15, and it was right at the end of the day it got there, so it's like 1.2. But all the other gains, less than 1% always, and it was even zero hedge. They're like, oh, the stocks tumbled. It's like the worst day that the Dow had during the big scare of nuclear war was down 0.9%. Even when the NASDAQ is down a lot, doesn't matter. You rarely even see a down day for the Dow at all, because yes, they are limiting volatility in the Dow. They don't want anyone to have any fear at all to ever invest in it. They should be joining the PPT at all costs. In the case of gold, it's always been the same. You should never, ever, ever let there be excitement or momentum or follow through. And this is until the cartel breaks, which all others have, and this one eventually will, and probably a lot sooner than most people can imagine. That's the games that they play. They have all kinds of other games they play too. They'll grab onto the VIX, they'll grab onto the oil price, they'll grab onto the yen. I say, I've had a saying for years. I say, gold is whatever is down. So one day oil will be down, and they'll hit it and say, oh my God, gold's down because of deflation. Look at the price of oil. And then the next day, bonds will be down, and they'll go, oh, look, gold's down because rates are going up. And then bonds will go up, and they'll say, oh, look, gold's going down because yields are going down. That's deflation. So they'll just make up whatever. And that's just how the game has been played for the last 15 years. And it won't be played like that forever. Unfortunately, for holders of physical metals, because of the aforementioned crushing of the mining industry and the inflation-adjusted prices, there's really no material downside here, because there's not going to be a mining industry at all. There'll be no production if prices go much lower. And we've seen this before. It happened in 2008. It happened after the 2013 smash. You push it too far, the physical demand comes flying in and takes out the supply, and you have shortages.
Well, they've done a good job of controlling the price, however you want to take that. One thing they haven't been able to control is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has had this crazy moves. And if we would have seen gold do what Bitcoin does, that would have sent a clear message to the market, a fear message. And I'm wondering, should people be, or at least the governments or people in general, should this be a barometer as to what is going on with the current economic global situation, what we are seeing in Bitcoin, and should it have that same implication of gold doing the same thing?
That's a good question. Look, if gold had done what Bitcoin had done the last year, there probably would have been Armageddon already. It would have mean the gold cartel has completely collapsed involuntarily because of hyperinflation, and we'd be in a really, really scary world. When we're talking about, Bitcoin's up 10x from last year. And by the way, that's when I started talking about it in April of 2016. But yes, the answer to your question is absolutely yes. And that's why I call Bitcoin and precious metals twin destroyers of the fiat regime. It's why I've been saying why Bitcoin will make gold and silver eventually go up, because it absolutely is a barometer. It's not like a tech stock where, oh, this new technology is gaining adoption, so good for the people who are using it. It's an indictment of the financial system. It's a technology that conveniently came out of the, to borrow the, forgive the pun, the ether in 2009 in the middle of the financial crisis, invented by an anonymous person or persons to break the financial system that caused the very crisis that we were in. And now that we're at, anyone, you certainly are following the space, and you know very well that this Bitcoin has been through the ringer. I mean, to be around 9 years in cryptocurrency is like being around 100 years in the stock market. It has fought off all of the attacks, including the recent hard fork attack, which was, everyone was so scared it was going to destroy, and they wound up shrugging it off, and the price doubled immediately afterward, because it's gaining a network effect because of the acceptance the world around. Yes, a lot of it is hodlers, meaning people are just simply holding it because they believe it will be worth more. But the reason they believe it will be worth more is not like you own a lot of securities, like you just think that they'll appreciate in value. In this case, people believe that Bitcoin is going to take over the financial system, which I believe with all of my heart. I wrote many articles and podcasts. The one a week ago everyone must listen to. It's called The Upcoming Monetary Death Cross, Fiat versus Crypto, where I'm talking about, I believe that the future of day-to-day utilitarian money is going to be cryptocurrency. And Bitcoin is going to be sharing the spotlight with precious metals in the wealth storage arena. There's very few, as I call them, scarcity assets out there with any track record or ability to actually preserve wealth. And that's why I think once Bitcoin and cryptocurrency really builds adoption, and at the pace it's going, I can't see that 3 years from now it's not going to have widespread adoption. You're going to see precious metals no longer be considered a threat by the government as their primary monetary nemesis. The government won't care about gold anymore. They'll just be focusing, like Don Quixote flailing at windmills, on Bitcoin and leaving gold to be what it always has been. It has always been best as a wealth storage asset. It's been abused and bastardized in the, to be for gold standards that get destroyed. But gold and silver are not practical as monetary standards. They are practical as monetary assets. And I think Bitcoin is the best thing that has ever happened to precious metal investors.
Yeah, that's obviously a big point, in considering a lot of people believe that Bitcoin is a competitor to a lot of precious metals investors, considering we haven't really seen the move that we've all been wanting to see. Of course, we wanted to see silver go from $13 to $200-300 the way we saw Ethereum do, but we really haven't seen that yet. And so many people are selling their precious metals in certain cases and then going into cryptocurrency, which I don't advocate for. I think there should be room for both, but some might see that as competition for precious metals because they're not doing it, and so the demand for precious metals may not be there. But I know you have a lot of insight on that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I remember your brother interviewed me in San Diego. It's on the internet. You can Google it. It was in like early 2012, and Bitcoin was in the middle of one of its nascent runs. I don't know, maybe 100 to 200. And he was asking me about it. And my initial answer was, I tried to be cautious, say, look, I don't really know. I don't understand it yet. It's obviously getting a little attention because it's going up, but I have my doubts. I certainly would doubt that there's really a cap on the 21 million coins and that it's ever going to be able to, quote, replace gold. But that was many years ago. And, I followed it over the years. I actually had one coin on Mt. Gox. I guess I can call that a badge of courage. Or a souvenir, whatever you want to call it, because it always intrigued me, even though I didn't fully believe in it yet. And I had written several articles even after that called "Is Bitcoin Money?" And I thought of it kind of in terms of it was a competitor for gold and silver, even if I was intrigued by it. But now that you fast forward to where we are today, now Bitcoin is at its strongest it's ever been because the network is proven to be secure, the cap is proven to be secure. And the hacks, it's hack proof. The actual protocol is hack proof, not the exchanges, but the protocol is. So I believe that in a very rapid amount of time, it has taken on monetary properties. I mean, it's indisputable. And so a lot of people in my sector continue to say, well, it's a competitor. Bitcoin's going to zero. Only gold will ever survive. And that's kind of silly. I talk about, I wrote the other day, the coexistence of scarcity assets. If you're talking about simply ways to protect your value, there's $350 trillion worth of financial assets out there, and there's only a couple of $1 billion afloat of physical precious metals and Bitcoin out there. So forgetting the monetary aspects, it's so ridiculous to believe that competitors, when there's such tiny markets that are going to be in high demand from trillions of dollars leaving the fiat currency system. There's more than enough for both. So they don't have to compete. But more importantly, they're both fighting the same battle. Fiat currency is the enemy. And while Bitcoin in the big picture will probably be able to have more uses, if you're simply talking about, people who are, quote, gold bugs, like gold is going to be the everything to everyone. No, it's not. It's ridiculous. Gold is not practical for transacting unless you're in a Mad Max world. And if we get to a Mad Max world, all this stuff is moot. Who cares what we say here? And that's probably an unlikely scenario anyway in the first world. Let's hope. But when you talk about the reasons that we own precious metals, I wrote an article 3 or 4 years ago, long before I even was considering Bitcoin seriously, called "Is Gold Money? Who Cares?" And my reasoning was, I don't own it because I'm a gold bug that believes gold should be money. I believe it's the most undervalued asset in the market with monetary values that will last forever. And now that Bitcoin is as strong as it's ever been, I more than ever believe in precious metals monetary value, because I do believe a crisis is coming, that it's been held off, as I call it, the most overdue financial crisis in history. And when it does, there's going to be not only fleeing to safe haven assets, but a fleeing out of the fiat currency system. And now that Bitcoin is there, there's an actual tool to not just escape like in gold, but to actually have another monetary system that governments can't control.
I love it. And one of the things that I've been saying in follow-up interviews is we've seen cryptocurrency go from 2011, monopoly money. 2013 was real speculation. 2014, 2015, everyone forgot about it. And then 2016, 2017, it really solidified itself into the future. And in 2018, I believe that it's going to be an asset class. Cryptocurrency, it's going to be an asset class, and we're going to see a lot of institutional money start to enter the space. So a lot of opportunity, and even if it's just people going in for the fact that they need to get their money out of the fiat currency world that we live in. So I see all those things, but there's a lot of people out there who still question it. And before we move on to the next topic, Peter Schiff has been pretty adamantly against Bitcoin. And, for reasons he says, hey, just because Bitcoin can't be, is limited in supply, there's infinite amount of other cryptocurrencies that can replace it. So technically it's not finite. We've seen that even with the Bitcoin Cash. And the fact that Bitcoin isn't actually, or he would say that,
well, put it this way, you can end your question here, because I feel like you're just throwing me the biggest softball of all time. I don't need any more.
All right, go ahead.
This thing is right sitting on my bat in the sweet spot. Okay. Well, first of all, the thing with all that money that's leaving the fiat currency arena. Okay. Let's say people actually believed that all of it's going to crypto, like everyone is losing faith in the dollar. Because look, everyone buying Bitcoin in the institutional arenas, they're not all buying it simply because of speculation. They're doing their homework. They realize what central banks are doing and what they're about to do. And so there is money that's flooding out of the system. And of course, since Bitcoin is going up, it gets the majority of the money. When gold was going up in 2011, it got a huge amount of money. And when it goes up again, it'll get a huge amount of speculative momentum money too. But even if you thought all of the money that's leaving the system is going to go into crypto, it's going to cause one of two different things to happen. If you have this massive bubble in the price, and I don't mean bubble in the price of Bitcoin, meaning like it's not a real technology, it's going to burst. But if you talk about a huge, quote, inflation of the price, meaning there's a huge amount of capital that's created, and at the same time the other financial markets don't deflate, we're talking about there's going to be major inflationary pressures around the world, because you just created, trillions of dollars could be created. They're going to be spent, they're going to circulate. And that's going to increase inflationary pressures and bonds and all that, and that's going to be very good for gold. Conversely, if people flood out of the fiat currency system, causing a drain of these overvalued assets, meaning they actually sell stocks and bonds, then you're going to have a deflationary crisis, and of course, the central banks will go berserk printing money. So there's no situation where people leave the fiat currency system for Bitcoin that's bad for gold. I think that yesterday my podcast was called Gold's Win-Win Scenarios in the upcoming hyperinflationary explosion. So I'm not worried about that. And again, I just mentioned before, not competitors at all. Gold is a wealth storage asset. Bitcoin is a monetary system, a protocol that's going to change the world. Gold's not changing the world. Gold is what it always has been, a wealth storage asset, which thanks to Bitcoin will probably be in more demand. Now, as for Schiff, look, I could substitute his name with pretty much everyone else in our sector. The only other people in our sector that have said positive things about gold that I could think of are Jeff Berwick and Vic Swear, neither of whom are actually in the precious metal sector. They have backgrounds in precious metals, but Vic is a newsletter writer, and Jeff is, I guess, the equivalent of a newsletter writer. He has his own, YouTube channel and subscription service. So their background is precious metals, but they're certainly not in the precious metal community. In the actual community, there's not a single person aside from me that's talked about this at all in a positive light. Most of them have ignored it. And the ones that come in now are still being skeptical because either they're upset that things went up without them, or they think it's a competitor and they act that way. And in Schiff's particular case, it's almost embarrassing to listen to him. And I'd say I hope he hears it, but he won't hear. He hears it so much from so many people. You talk about digging a grave. This is a man who's supposed to be one of the smartest guys in the business. And he really is when it comes to economics and political observations. But when you listen to someone who's so well respected in the financial circles, speaking with such uninformed comments about cryptocurrency, it's kind of embarrassing. When he says there's an infinite amount of supply. No, there's an infinite amount of supply of cryptocurrency. There's not an infinite amount of supply of Bitcoin. And he's going, well, they just spun off Bitcoin Cash. No, there's no they. Bitcoin didn't do anything. A group of people decided to create a fork of an altcoin, which they thought could compete with Bitcoin. And it took exactly a few hours, if that, before the Bitcoin network shrugged it off as an altcoin. It would be like a couple of guys from Mercedes, right? They say, you know what? We're going to create Mercedes Cash. It's going to be a company just like Mercedes, except we're going to call it Mercedes Cash and slightly change the paint color. And it's going to be great. Everyone's going to flock to it. And what would happen if they did that? Not a single person would buy a car. And that's exactly what happened with Bitcoin Cash. And probably, I don't even think SegWit 2X will happen now because Bitcoin Cash essentially stole its thunder. So it's kind of silly. I mean, and all the things he says are really, it's not even worth talking about here. Because if you want to attack something, use facts. If you attack things with useless opinions, you're just going to hurt your case. And in the case of cryptocurrency, what I've done is try to show people, both from a personal level and a professional level, why it's good for gold and silver. I mean, I still own my gold and silver, and I feel better about it than ever because of what I think is the best ally. It's like all these people in our sector. Basically, the way we think we're going to beat the cartel, okay, is hope. In Star Wars, we have a hope that we're going to beat the Empire. We hope that the system will fall of its own weight. We know mathematically it should and eventually will, but we just wake up every day hoping something happens. To the point where you almost have to hope that a bomb gets dropped on North Korea because of the market manipulation is so horrible. And there's nothing you can do about it. All the articles I've written, all the podcasts I've done, all the Eric Sprotts of the world, the Sinclairs, the biggest names out there have done everything they can, and it's been useless. Because we're running against a very powerful enemy with, importantly, very powerful fintech. They have algorithms. They have high frequency trading. They have derivatives. They control the markets and the regulators. They own the COMEX. These are very powerful weapons. The thing that they don't have in the fintech world is Bitcoin. And cryptocurrency technology, fintech, is like, I call it Star Trek compared to Flintstones. And that's the ace in the hole that we as the precious metal community have in the Bitcoin revolution.
Andy, I want to transition over to someone who's been making a big name for herself in the alternative media, whatever you want to call it. Her name's Lynette Zhang. I actually interviewed her on Crush the Street, and she's been shot out of a cannon, making her presence very known very quickly here in just a matter of what it seems like weeks. And she has pointed out her concerns for OFFMAN, this altcoin. And she's been warning about the digitization of hard assets like tea and real estate. And she makes an argument that this OFFMAN is tied to the SDR and implicates Bitcoin and Ethereum as being controlled by banks, central banks, or the IMF. And so I wanted to see if you have any thoughts on this.
Oh, yeah, I have some thoughts. It's funny because you say she's made a name for herself, right? I never heard of her. The only way I've heard of her is this weekend One of it was either yours or SGT put out an interview with her where she said this, like, Bitcoin is going to be commandeered by the government. And I got all these emails. And as soon as I saw the words IMF and SDR, I laughed. But I didn't even need to see those words because I know the reality of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a decentralized network with no control over it, and people like the IMF are useless. And the SDR is never going to happen. I mean, Jim Rickards, who I've always, despised. I've despised him from day one. I despised him when he came to the GATA conference, and I've never trusted a thing he said. I think half the things for every smart thing he says something that misleads people or is FUD. He's like the Roger Ver of the sector. With that, he's got the two sides of his face. That one day he's out saying gold is great, and it's great, and then the next day he's like, yeah, but the SDR is going to come around. Don't you worry. So I don't care what he says. And anyone who thinks that a group of countries that all hate each other are going to come together and create a fiat currency that's a basket of their currencies after their own currencies fail, and let alone at a time where you have Bitcoin coming in, it's just ridiculous. It's not even worth speaking. So the fact that this woman, who I've never heard of, you're talking about 15 minutes of fame, she's probably in 1459 right now. It's immaterial. It's kind of like there was this woman, Karen Hudis, a couple of years ago. It was the same thing. She was a lawyer for the IMF. And I'm thinking, well, what could a lawyer for the IMF possibly do or know? And by the way, she's also famous, you can Google her, for believing really strongly that space aliens inhabit the Earth, okay? And she came out and said, I know from my role as a lawyer at the IMF that there's a huge stash of gold in Hawaii that could swamp the supply of the world. I just know it. Only her, this lawyer from the IMF, who believes in aliens. And I got all these people emailing me, is this true? And she got a bunch of podcasts out of it. It's the same thing. Lynette Zhang, anyone who thinks that banks control Bitcoin, how could they control Bitcoin? Does she watch what we watch? Does she understand the protocol of Bitcoin, that it couldn't be commandeered by the biggest Chinese miners? It certainly can't be commandeered by a bunch of Keystone Cop banks. And Ethereum is run by a guy. It's Vitalik Buterin. Him and his guys invented it, and they put it out there, and there's an Ethereum Foundation. And by the way, Ethereum is not a monetary asset, it's a tech asset. Bitcoin is what the governments fear. Governments don't fear Ethereum. They can do whatever they want with it. Microsoft, all these guys, because it's a useful tech asset. In fact, I was seeing yesterday, it says, is Ethereum going to usurp the Amazon cloud? It's a tech company. And that's what people need to understand when you buy the Ethereum token, that you are not buying into a monetary system. And Vitalik Buterin will be the first to tell you that. It's an infinite supply, and their goal is to be a technology platform that transforms internet, protocol, but not a monetary system like Bitcoin. And as for what she's talking about, yeah, there will be digitization of assets. That's what the definition of the blockchain is. But that has nothing to do with a monetary system based on using a decentralized Bitcoin protocol that no one can control versus fiat currency. So I couldn't care less what this woman has to say. And anyone who emailed me about it, I said the same. And look, it's good that you interviewed her. I mean, I don't even know where she came from or what her motives are. But the fact is, when a Karen Hudis comes out, the impact is kind of muted because most people realize it's kind of stupid. If there was stashes of gold large enough to swamp the supply, someone at some point would bring them out or sell them or something. But not, but here people are scared because, you know how it is with Bitcoin. Every time there's a new FUD thing, you get scared. Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. Is this real? So you have to ask yourself the question. But I think her claims, when you talk about the SDR and the IMF, it's like, oh my God, give me a break. That's my answer.
Yeah. And that was my response to her. I mean, I didn't oppose her directly, and I gave her a platform, but I definitely brought up the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized and it does its own thing. And now, just like Ethereum, there's other altcoins that are built on top of it, but the foundation of Ethereum and Bitcoin, you can't control those things, and that's why that's where my disagreements with her were on that. But in this final thing I want to ask you about, when it comes to governments and their fear of cryptocurrency, is it possible that we see central banks come out with something that looks like a Bitcoin that they control, that they fully control, to compete with it? If you can't beat it, join it, type of thing. But it's not Bitcoin. It's something that they centrally control that looks like a blockchain, and that's palatable to everyone who thinks Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these other cryptocurrencies are cool.
Well, put it this way, I can do a long, dramatic answer, which will give all the details perfectly, or I could just say two words, and I think everyone who's listening will understand. So you're talking about whether the central banks will create their own cryptocurrencies to compete with Bitcoin? Here's my answer: Mercedes Cash. Okay? No, there's really no more to be said. It's so silly. Okay.
Cryptocurrency News Channel. Your new future. Thank you. Follow us on YouTube.